Hey there. So I did coaching today on our group call over the cortisol awakening response and really beginning to kind of dissect the different areas of the Dutch Plus. And of course, I forgot to record it. So I thought I would create a PowerPoint presentation. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you in this video two separate and very distinct cases to begin to describe to you this cortisol awakening response and the importance and the role that it plays in our overall health. So let's dive right in. Okay, so case number one is, as you can see here, what we're looking at, again, is the Dutch Plus. So if you've already received your labs back regarding the Dutch Plus, go ahead and pull those out so you can do a comparison as I go through this. So as you can see here, this client has a very flat cortisol awakening response. So with the Dutch Plus, we look at cortisol when we first wake up, 30 minutes after waking, and then 60 minutes after waking, because what we expect to see here is a spike at that 30-minute range, and then it begins to taper the rest of the day. Okay, and so whenever we do see a flat cortisol awakening response, this is something that will have to be supported in order to get this functioning in an appropriate manner again. So our cortisol helps to get us up out of bed in the morning. Certain things that help to trigger and stimulate the cortisol are light. So if you're waking up and you're keeping everything really dark and you're drinking your coffee first thing in the morning, and you're not giving your adrenal glands the chance to actually begin to produce that spike in the morning, then you could get a flat response like this. Now, the other reason that this tends to occur is because you have been in a highly stressed state, so a chronic stress situation for a long period of time, and you will eventually lose your stress resilience. Okay, and so as I mentioned today on the group call, this is very much like a diabetic situation. So for instance, with, as I should rephrase, type 2 diabetic situation, where eating a high sugar diet for an extended period of time is going to decrease the response that your insulin is going to have. It's going to decrease that insulin sensitivity. So same thing occurs when your adrenals keep pumping out high amounts of stress constantly. They eventually become where they will decrease that stress response. Now, when this happens, it's so important to get this regulated and to get this functioning in the way that it's supposed to, because in the first 60 minutes of waking with this cortisol awakening response, especially those of us with autoimmunity or a higher risk of cancer cells, then this cortisol awakening response, it actually triggers the immune system to start filtering through those good cells and bad cells. So the cells that have kind of gone rogue and have began to attack our body and are now recognizing our body as a foreign particle, this is our backup system. So this is when it will filter and say, hey, this isn't right. We need to tag this and get it out of the body. So for apoptosis or cell death. And when you don't have this kind of response, then those immune cells can continue to multiply, even though, and much like a cancer cell, you know, when we have that genetic mutation with a cancer cell, then we want to make sure that our backup system is working efficiently. Okay, so here in this situation, we can see this is the amount of free cortisol that's within the bloodstream. This is only representative of about 1 to 3% of the cortisol within our body, but as you can see here is very, very low, well below the normal range. And when we look here, this is actually the metabolized cortisol. So even though this is still on the low end of normal, this tells me that the kidneys, the liver, and some other organs that are responsible for metabolizing cortisol are working too quickly. Okay, and so it's breaking down the cortisol very quickly, and leaving this client feeling like a chronic fatigue type situation. All right, and so here, this is where we can actually begin to, so this would be page 6, I think, of the Dutch Plus, and this is where you can start to see how stress is impacting the adrenal gland response. And why this is so important is because so often we hear so many people with chronic fatigue, they will, get classified as adrenal fatigue. And so there's a lot of controversy around the terminology of adrenal fatigue. And as you can see here, the adrenals, although they are producing a small amount of cortisol, they are still producing well in that normal range of DHEA. So it's not that the adrenals as a whole are fatigued, it's just that we've lost that resilience to stress. Okay, and so when I see this type of patterning, it's very important. I'm actually going to go a little bit further than just, we need to do some deep breathing and meditation and really start to work on our stress response, but we also need to go a little more upstream to that. And because this is a chronic stress situation, and oftentimes this is coupled with personality traits or relationship issues where maybe as an individual we have trouble setting boundaries or being able to say no. And so our calendar's always jammed packed and we're going nonstop. So we need to start to work on some of those behaviors and patterns that have gotten us into this situation. Really working on some mindset and positive affirmations, but again, working on those interpersonal relationships and boundary setting with this patient. One thing that I always like to tell my clients to do is to actually establish a prana builder and a prana depleter list.